the advocacy resolution is for the WRC.
All right, we're on.
Let's call this meeting to order, and we will do our pledge and our moment of silence before the regular board meeting. So would the clerk call the roll, please?
Commissioner Kramer,
Present.
Commissioner O'Rourke is absent, Commissioner Rexroth,
Present.
Chairman Wessel,
Here?
Commissioner Ross,
Present.
Commissioner Allgaier is absent, Commissioner Lautner.
Present.
Thank you. Well, our purpose today is to continue with our review of finances and budget issues. And are you going to introduce this, Deb?
Oh, well, yes, I think at the last meeting, it was suggested that we have a report, continued report, probably perhaps one of our last reports, as this is the last official meeting where Kathy will be the interim finance director, moving into her new role. And then next month, we'll also be moving into the budget discussions. So we'll be setting up, sending out information about future budget meetings. So this is kind of a segue into that discussion. So ladies, turn it over to you two.
Well, do we want to approve the agenda or have public comment, or do we just want to skip that?
We do want to do that. Yes.
Thanks, Michelle.
We have two people in the public. Would you like to speak now? I know you're speaking before or after this.
I make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in support of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. We have an agenda now. Now we are at public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening?
Just wanted to say thank you for having us for the Resource Center.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we turn to our two experts for our discussion of the budget process. Thank you.
Thrill and wow you.
We're here to be thrilled and wowed.
Okay. First of all, to keep you up to date on the drainage district, I'm updating the same sheet that you've seen previously so that you know what we have fronted to pay bills on these drainage districts that are
Thank
pointed
you.
out. In claims and accounts tonight, you will see two pretty sizable bills for Schaumburg drain. They are in this number that you do need to approve. So this is pending your approval of claims and accounts tonight. So I just wanted to give you an update on where we stand on the drainage district. If you slide that underneath your summary, it's a one sheet. Oops.
Sorry.
They should look like this.
We're handing it out to you. Under your name tags. Under your name tags.
Oh, gotcha.
We got so many papers in so many places. Put it on your deck there.
Okay.
So if you have a previous drainage district summary sheet, you can pitch it, and this is your most current one. As long as you approve this.
And then, thank you. Oh, good. Will we get, because this is such a, I mean, we're obviously going to the budget soon. So do we kind of want to wait till the budget to discuss this in depth further, or would it be easier for you to just like monthly keep it up to date for us?
I think a monthly up to date,
Okay.
only because Steve knows that he is for sure signing that note for Lake Bluffs. And his indications to us is that he will be signing the second note prior to the end of the year on Schaumburg.
Oh, you will? Okay.
I believe that is.
So that isn't budgeted for, so that's
Then
two
that's what-
unbudgeted.
Correct.
to
and that's
deal
what
with.
Kathy's bringing forward to you, yeah.
Okay.
So you had a board motion, maybe last month in April, to take that money from DTR, to pay for that, that Lake Bluffs. I would probably see that we would instead take that from, general fund. But Kathy and I are gonna rework that cash number, because your cash won't start to increase till July, when you do your tax. When you pass your L429 tonight, then that goes out to the townships, and then they're allowed, in essence, to tax and collect. So we won't see new cash flow until July, August, for sure by September, when people are paying their bills. One thing that's not representative, I think, in our cash tonight that we have with us is the DTR that's pulled back to the general fund. I don't believe that that's been posted, because we're working with April 30th. And I think that was just here in the first part of May, that any delinquent taxes that are owed to the general fund, the county treasurer does a transfer. I believe it came in like at 289,000 or something, so it certainly covers that Lake Bluffs.
Can I ask you a question
Yep.
before we go further? I think now you're answering my question. So the county shares 253. Okay, we have the bill for the road commission. So the general funds, what you're saying is that 61,000 we've already put out of pocket.
Yep.
So that we will be reimbursing.
Right, when the note is signed. I
So the
believe
net
that-
cost is, that isn't real, I don't know if net cost is really the right, net, this is more like additional funds to pay.
Right, so
right?
you're gonna pay your county share, so we actually will, probably, I don't think we'll cut a check, it's gonna be a transfer. When I know that Steve is formulating that note, we will put that together, at whichever board meeting, most likely, I would think June. I haven't checked with him on when he's doing that. So that money gets transferred into our drain. And I know I spoke at the last meeting, I think it was, last Tuesday. These drainage, districts are a very, calculated mystery, I would call it, in funds. So we're certainly hoping that Sean brings his expertise. I didn't feel, I hadn't talked to Bill about this, so this is just my opinion up there. I didn't want to set forth funds that he's going to come in and take over. So since we can wait, the note's not signed in May, he can then decide with the auditors, because it looks like if each drainage district has to have a fund, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 funds that will be created, as well as our drain that we had back in the late 90s is in a different account. That account number no longer is used in the chart of accounts for the state of Michigan. So I think that when Sean comes on board, he can have a Zoom with the auditors and they can decide how many funds they're gonna start. It all has to be a separate bank account, and then he can hit the ground running with that. That being said, the 253,700 will be sent over to that fund. We will internally, the finance department and accounting will bill the road commission 21, they'll send an invoice. When the time the note is signed, the first check cut, I believe, from that separate checking account comes back to the county for that debt, for that liability of 61,479. So it's gonna be a transfer out, 253, a revenue to the general fund of 21, and a transfer in from the drain of 61. That's where you get the net 170.
Some of these dollar amounts that we fronted, we started back in 2018.
Yep, but the minute he told me we started, I pointed those off.
So we've been accumulating this for
Yeah.
years, 5, 6 years on some of them, so
Okay.
I don't want to say it's old general fund money, but it's money we've kind of forgotten we had. Is that fair?
Mhm.
Yes, but that goes to the question, I think I'm following up on Melinda's question. I mean, how much of that was ever actually, because we approved it, doesn't mean it was budgeted.
Oh, no,
And so,
this is, for him, whenever, excuse me, in my past experience, when I started this, it's dollar for dollar. There was no, if he spent 173,000, he was budgeted. Did he come to the board and ask for the 173? No, he didn't have to as drain commissioner.
it's still not my point. I mean, when I look at what we're spending, what our planning is, we either are spending things that we had budgeted and planned on, or things we hadn't planned on, right? And so, the entire 253,700 is not budgeted right now. It's not
Right.
part of our county budget, so I'm trying to follow up with Melinda Lautner. Because we've already spent 61 of it, doesn't mean that 61 was ever budgeted. It means we
Right.
transferred it as we went along. So
No,
that's what I'm trying to clarify.
It would always be, because it's a general fund department of the drain commissioner, it has to by audit, it had to be budgeted. I either had to bring an amendment mid-year or end of year. It has to be county board approved to be spent, meaning not spent prior. Meaning he didn't come to me and say, I'm gonna spend $100,000, Jen. What it is I have GEI for 25 in June. I have 50 in October. So in December, I move the money.
She played catch-up after, you're right. We
I played
never
catch-up.
budgeted for it.
But that's
We-
the point I'm
we
still.
account-
It's
Counted
not
for it.
approved. The drain commissioner is a totally different animal. It's not budgeted at the time you adopt your budget.
The $61,000 was
That's what
budgeted,
you're
the
asking.
253 is not.
It was a surprise.
The 253 is after he puts together the drainage districts, finds out and goes out for bids, and then comes back to you and says what the county share is. So like Kathy has right now, the county share on South Bar is 56,250. My guess is that he's telling her that South Bar, that's what she's looking at on your percentage, right? That's just where you're getting these numbers of what the county would owe
It's
of the total. Fish.
Yeah.
So Steve has
Yeah.
prepared the county share portion for you so that you're aware for your future what you need. Does that make sense now?
I get all the county share thing, it's just a difference between what has been part of a budget that has been approved, like, I mean, the budget was made a year before these costs were done. And that included these costs, even though we spent it, doesn't mean it becomes part of our budgeting process.
So there's two different animals. So the first animal is any money that the county board spends for a drainage district, Steve is in charge of. You have to
Gotcha,
fund
gotcha.
that no matter what. He doesn't come to you and tell you he's gonna spend money.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
So what that means is by department, by board motion, I amend and find the resources to cover his bills at the end of the year.
And to me, that's an entirely different animal than part of a budget.
Okay,
mean,
let me try. I
Yeah.
know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So when we adopt our budget in October of the year,
Yeah.
it covers all those departments we went through in the general fund.
Correct.
And maybe 100,000 for this one, 100,000 for that one. That's my budget for the coming year, but Steve may come in with zero. But then we come back in January and we have to amend his new budget for the new year because we found out this. So it's always approved in the budget, but not when we adopt the budget for the next year in January.
That's
And that's what you're asking.
Right, that's the point I've been trying to
This
make.
is arrears
Yeah, yep.
in the past.
But since we haven't done the amendment yet, it's not in the budget now though, right?
The 253,700 is not in your budget right now. No. My recommendation would be is when we get to talk about the budget amendments,
Thank you.
where you'll take that from.
So, so if
But
I,
it'll also show a revenue. When I amend that budget, I'll show a revenue from the road commission and I'll show a revenue from the drain. So I'm gonna have a transfer out of 253, I'm gonna have a revenue of 21, and I'm gonna have a transfer in of 61. None of those are approved right now or presented to you today.
Which was exactly the nature of my question. Yes, thank you.
Can I,
Yeah.
can I ask too, you, just in passing, you mentioned it up past drain from the 90s?
Yeah, we have one called Brewery Creek, it's fund number 806, it's up in Elmwood.
And it's completely over, or what?
Elmwood's absorbing it into their township responsibilities. Steve has told me that there's a few legal documents that just have to be completed so that they can absorb that, and that should be done.
So there's no future cost anticipated at all,
My
or,
understanding Elmwood's taking over.
okay, okay, thanks.
Any other questions on the drain sheet? Drainage district overview?
We're looking at those.
no, we'll read it more.
Yeah.
It's a lot to read here. Thank you.
If you'd like it in a different format, please. let
Okay,
me know.
thank you.
The summary sheet we talked about last month at our meeting, that I was sensing frustration among the commissioners that they were having projects on multiple sheets, and this is, I believe, what you requested, so we'll just work through it. At the top of the page, under the green bar, these are the potential or ongoing projects that have been under discussion on your monthly meetings. You have approved some of these items for, like in the Leelanau Township Tower, the RFPs are out, and what it may cost. You have a recommended motion tonight to approve machine engineering for road specs, and that will come from Fund 101. Gaza Zubek, you've already approved at last month's meeting, that bill came in at 6,900, you approved up to 7,500. And the motion also requested that Cherryland Electric would be reimbursing the county for 50% of that 6,900. So now the unknowns going forward, I've listed, there's a road cost, a utility hookup, and of course the tower structure. So to be determined is how we can just look at that right now. Your HVAC phase 2 and 3, going back into 2022 minutes, I think it was November, Fed Hackle, AIA proposed some plans. The bill was $50,000. That bill has not been received, we have not paid that bill yet. It's still outstanding, and there was a subsequent presentation, I believe in mid-January at this level on HVAC 2 and 3. So just wanted to let you know that we know there's a bill, hasn't been paid, it has been budgeted, correct, Jen? Yep. The environmental health build-out in the lower level is currently under a redesign rebid from what I understand from your last meeting. And the architect again has an outstanding bill that we have not seen or paid, and that's $32,268 approximately. Then you have approved Mission Engineering, and it has the initial evaluation for the Government Center North Wall facade. Deb's going to update you on that later. And then we have talked about the Leelanau Dam and Loop Walkway, and that was discussed last week. So these are kind of big projects that you're looking at or discussing or contemplating or prioritizing. It's discretionary, it's all up to you. So we just want to kind of put those into one document for you. Yes.
We have, like, you have DCS broadband, 160,000 contract.
Now,
Which portion is that?
I'll get underway to the underway.
Oh, you're not underway to the underwear. You're underway yet, okay. All right. I thought you were moving on, so I want to get to them.
I love the naval reference to underway.
Yes, okay.
Underway is underway.
Underway, okay.
So these are things that have been previously approved by the board. There's motions in place. Just something that I can ask for you going forward, it would be very helpful to Sean, is when motions come before you, if you can state an up to a dollar amount or a dollar amount, if it's vague, that is very, I don't know. I don't like it when I get a motion approving us to purchase something for you without a dollar amount in it, because that's too subjective for the pay grade. I like to have the dollar amount. And so like on VMware, the first item, you did make your motion not to exceed $68,141. I have that in my pending file, and every invoice that comes in on VMware, I go to Leanna and I say, is this part of the original bid? Where are we at? Because if she gets to that ceiling, we're back here in front of you. I don't want to be sitting in an office talking with Sean and going, what do you think? Should we go over 5,000? Nah, let's do it. You know, that's not our pay grade. That's what you were paid to do. So in your motions, if you can please put a dollar amount, that would be great. TNT vehicle, it is expected to be delivered this week. Your phone system, I believe, I got the last invoice on my desk. I'm going to talk to Leanna, make sure that we came in on the right number. The website design is underway. The fillable water stations are ordered. The DCS broadband project, the original contract was $160,000. In 2022, we paid down $69,476 with, that's year to date. Sorry, that's year to date. Sorry. What's remaining is $50,524. And we're making, that's been approved. It's budgeted.
That's what I had a question about. So what is the DCS?
That's Chris Scher. He's your manager, your project manager for your broadband.
Okay,
Consultant.
and that's what I thought it was, but that's only him.
Yes.
So what we don't have on here is our committed $1.5 million.
No, because that's, I'm sorry, that was in your ARPA. handout last time. So you have 3.2 million that you've got an agreement with, I believe. Right, there's a motion.
It was a $5 million commitment, and we tagged 3.2 of the ARPA dollars, correct? Am I remembering it right?
So I guess I'm in agreement, that would be a 1.8
Be
million.
more-
Yeah, January 31st, a motion by Sotis Little, that the county administrator was to work with Legal and develop a contract agreement with Point Broadband. As recommended by LIF, committee, that 3.2 million be potentially allocated to this effort, and that other funding options be explored to raise the additional 1.8.
1.8, okay. So,
But we have a 1.8 commitment underway. We've agreed to that already.
You have agreed to a 1.8 million, yes.
So, I mean, that would.
That's what I'm saying, it
that
should be one
on-
more line.
Should be on an
because
underway
we've got to
part.
find that funding.
Right.
You certainly could.
Yeah.
We can add that to the line items.
That was kind of the idea, like, everything that's been said in some way, even though it may not follow, I mean, and I get what you're doing, may not follow the exact process. If we're committed to it, we want to see it on the list.
When
And-
we wrap up this meeting and you
Okay.
start the next meeting, I can go and adjust this and get you the handout right away, so it's.
Cool, thank you.
We got some pencils, so.
Yeah.
That's okay, I want you to know
Yeah.
something that's worth the document for your refrigerator.
Okay. Oh, that's very.
So, then district court recording equipment, of course, half of that was funded with a RAP grant. And then last month you approved the mini split, it's underway, there's some bills in claims and accounts for, Standard Electric to, wiring, switchboard, stuff like that. And the sheriff's Mitsubishi cooling system. So these are things that are all underway, that the board has used their discretion and made motions to approve, to move forward. These are going forward. Then you've got your pending statutory commitments. As Michelle and Jen have pointed out, the drainage district is a different animal. When Steve Christensen, your drain commissioner, comes to you, it's as a courtesy. He does not have to do that. So, he's just keeping you in the loop and keeping you informed. And you will more than likely see both of these drainage districts in the way. One point that Jen and I discuss quite frequently is in those funding for the drainage districts, each one has a 10% maintenance built into the big project numbers, so 753 for Lake Bluff.
Mhm.
That will be pointed out in, or 860,000 for that one. 86,000 will be put into a retainer for maintenance or for failure, and we could hold that in perpetuity. We can't touch it. It's strictly for that drain district. There.
Where will the 10% come from? From all the,
Taxpayers, as well as us.
the assessed
Built
district?
into the assessment.
Built into the assessment, okay. 10%.
And there's 1.5%, if I recall my notes, built into the project. Everybody pays to help reduce and pay the debt in case people sell in that period of time and don't pay the interest. They prepay. They prepay the debt due to clear the title on their house so they can sell it. Well, we're still on the hook for all that interest. So the 1.5% everybody pays helps cover that. And they've kind of worked that out with the encounters and actuarials that they can do. That's pretty typical. That they can, because otherwise we're on the hook for the interest.
I thought that if they didn't pay ahead, it had to be stretched out over the 20 years, and so it won't be just a lien on the house that will follow the new landowner or homeowner?
More than likely it gets settled at
Settled?
the buy-sell agreement because the new owner isn't going to want to deal with it. But that's a good negotiating tool if you're selling your house and you've got a special assessment on it.
Yeah.
It's a negotiating
Okay.
tool.
So once all the bills are paid and the drainage district has been done, completed, and everybody's paid, there's still money in the account, and that can't be touched?
Correct, only for maintenance only.
Or if there's a failure on the drainage, on construction work or whatever, if there's a failure, because then we'll go back to the county.
It doesn't preclude, though, from an additional assessment being levied if there's an issue.
And you probably won't be here in 20 years to experience.
No, I won't.
So, let's move on to our budget amendments. As we spoke at the last meeting, we did see amendments to buildings and grounds because we realized that this cost allocation was a little low. So we did buildings and grounds last month, and we also did computers because they were big ticket items. What Jen and I have worked on for this meeting is adjusting all of the salaries and the related items regarding the 3% cost of living increase that was approved by the board in September, but was not reflected going forward into 23. The reason this is important to get this caught up is that when Sean and Jen and I look at proposing the 24 budget to you, we want a good solid 6 months under our belt that's correct, as close as it can be to real figures for budget. So that when you look at the numbers, you can say, okay, if this is a real deal of 24 or 23, and we've amended it to the best of our ability, and you correct me, we can safely say these are good numbers to look at. Because you're not going to jump your wages 6%. If you're going to ask us to propose a 3% increase in the proposed wages for 24, it's not going to be a 6% jump. Yeah, everybody follow me on that?
Mhm.
Okay. So Jen, you want to take over?
Yeah. So I know that Deb mentioned that we won't be doing work sessions anymore, because we'll be going into budget cycle. But since this is most of yours first cycle, as well as Deb's, what happens is the budget amendments that are here prepared and approved in May, in our software, we go ahead and these budgets that are set forth, I would say are true to the case of what will be presented for you for 2024, other than salary increases, and also if a department has a special request. Otherwise, what happens in these now, if they're finalized and approved, we roll those in, and that's our start. So in June, we roll. There'll be a timeline provided by the county administrator as to the paperwork will be sent out to all department heads and elected officials regarding the budgets that they're in charge of. So for instance, if the president or the chair of Parks and Rec is Casey Newman, that's where the budget goes. And then at those committee meetings or commission meetings, they secure and write down their allocation, and it gets turned back into us. We typically have a 2 to 3 week turnaround. I think it's more like 3. So remember that when we send this budget out, they can't touch those expenses we talked about last meeting between 702 and 720. Those are fixed by board contracts or by union contracts or board policies. So what they're looking at is they're looking at office and operating supplies and capital purchases that they're going to do. The portion that is within the budget that weighs heavily on the budget, I would say for fringe, is your MERS. Your MERS actuarial does not come out until about the 10th to the 15th of June. So we don't actually start, we pre-work, but we don't actually physically hardline and start populating fields until July. So in the past, it's worked out best for the office if it's like the last week in July that the books are prepared to you. And that, I'm not sure if that's the same timeline that Deb's going to use, but in the past, that's what we do. You normally get the book. We kind of go over if Deb's going to follow Chet's way. She'll prepare a document that states what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, what you have to set up to approve. As Melinda said at the last meeting, most likely as a new group, you'll want to go page by page. I advise that because you have the ability as the Board of Commissioners to make any changes within those, other than like we talked about at those 702s to 720s. So if you think that the sheriff's gasoline comes in at 66, but you know the price of gas is higher, you want to put 76, that's your choice. You want to cut it to 56, that's your choice. That's what we do at those meetings. So the last week in July is most likely the timeline. So we will not meet, we will not have these conversations until we bring you that proposed budget. In that proposed budget, if I am helping with the assistants and Kathy and Sean, That's when we dig deep and figure out what's coming from your revenues, what's coming from your expenses. We always give you a balanced budget. So in that regard, that's where I'm going to start with this first one, which is 23007. So the first amendment at the top, it says resolution amending the general fund. This fiscal year amendment number is 23-007. It means we've had 6 prior to this time of year. The very first number is called fund balance forward. We talked about that in the last meeting or the meeting before. It's 401. So I look at it like this, when you're looking at government. If your current taxes and your services do not provide a balanced budget, we use fund balance forward. In some ways, I relate that to your savings account. It's money, it's technically not in a savings, but it's your funding that you're going to utilize to balance your budget. Without this number of 1,078,111, you would be underfunded and not have a balanced budget. So that number from last month was 1.8 million. I show in the second number 101,402, current taxes. The budget for revenues was conservative at 10.8, and with the L429, if it's signed and documented, your amended revenue will be 11,785,703.
Could I ask a question there? The treasurer mentioned that we have about a 95% collection rate. So can we assume that it'll be 11.7 minus about 5%?
Well, Kathy and I talked about that because what you don't have in front of you, and I think we did discuss it at one point, when John came on as treasurer, he wanted to see the delinquent taxes that come in, to, show the board what revenue that is, which is prior year's taxes. They could be taken either way in that regard when you're talking about DTR. When you're booking your current taxes, your tax bill goes out in July. You can pay that up until February 28th of the following year. So even though it says 402 current taxes, that's literally, in essence, what you collected in January and February. Then he closes his books, and then you start collecting in July, August, all through December. So he takes the sanction of that number. Your physical number that Andrew gave you was 12.1 million. So John took 334,000 and puts that into a line of revenue called settlements. And that's what he calls his delinquent number. I didn't see the journal entry yet, but I want to say his delinquent number is like 285, 295. Normally, in me, with running this, I would have dropped down that settlement to show that that is what your settlement number was. But I left it as is. It's just easier to do that for right now. And then I took that 402 number and I adjusted it down. Would it be higher a little bit? Yes, it would be.
Thank you.
If you weren't allocating a difference for delinquents, that number would say 12.1. And you wouldn't have a settlements adjustment. But there's a give and take with taxes. You can have a reassessment. And John's done it since 2013. He wanted to see what that is. Is it a couple dollars? Is it a couple $100,000? He wanted to see that figure. So that's where that comes from. And that is utilized when we go to prepare the budget number that he gives us that he wants to put for delinquent. All right, so the numbers that fall underneath 402, these are going to be revenues that either the board agreed to accept grants, or it's new revenue that the state is facilitating and passing through to you as the county, or it's by board motion. So for instance, the first one, marijuana tax. This was exciting that Northport has a marijuana facility, and the county received $51,842 for that facility. We got it last October and November, and you'll get it again in 2023. There's also a small marijuana excise tax. It's actually $13.50, but I rounded up for you.
Thank you.
All right. The next one, 502, is the LATCF. It's an acronym. It's the revenue sharing. That was the local units and tribal that in December, Deb went in and scheduled payment for. We received $50,000 in 2022. You will receive $50,000 in 2023. Revenue number 508, substance abuse, 93.0959, that's your C3. It helps fund the substance abuse number that's going to correlate down below. This is come in by board motion at 57,000 that you accepted this grant. 101, 540, Michelle and I can tell you a probate judge's salary, it probably hadn't changed when I started here in 2005 until probably 2020. They give the judge a raise. And so now that they have done so, the state is actually more of a cost share to us. And so it was budgeted at 120. Last year it came in at 127.9, so I rounded that up to 128. Number 543001 is your secondary road patrol. You had a standard of 30 and you accepted more, so I budgeted that in here. The secondary road and marine safety I'll discuss. When you apply for a grant, it's never a given of what you're going to get. So it's been my past practice, I'm not sure if it'll be Sean's, I do not include that in your budgets. When you approve your budget, you do not have that revenue. You have not applied for a grant, you don't know what number you're going to get. So I have always utilized and done an amendment like this to then post your revenue. But when it comes to budget time, it'll say 54 and 23, it'll say 0 and 24, okay? I don't presume you're gonna get your grants, and it's just something conservative on the revenue side. So the marine safety grant you just approved, or I think it's coming through tonight, right? 48,100. Survey and remonumentation, Trudy came to you at last Tuesday, stated that it was going to go up for the EES. I pulled that, it looks like it's 40,273. That survey and remonumentation is a true dollar for dollar, what comes in, what goes out. Secondary road or marine grant, your secondary road patrol, I didn't run the report. You're probably in that secondary road patrol looking at 94,000 as your expenses, you're collecting 54. Marine grant's about 80, 82, sometimes 85, you're collecting 40. So it's not true 50-50, but that's where that revenue comes in from. On the 614-011, the registered deeds IRS was budgeted at 1,000 last year in proposed revenues. I've already collected 1,800, so I'm being very modest, putting 2,000 in there. But it's a number that when you come in, July, that first meeting, or when we move to that first week of August, you're gonna have all your revenues, and it's gonna show that I've amended these revenues, and then we're gonna tell you what's proposed revenues. So if you see that I've marked that it was 1,000, a registered deeds IRS, and it bumped to 2, and by the time we get to August, it's 5, that's up to you if you wanna make it 5,024, or you're gonna be modest and keep it at 2. That's what we do when we go through the budget, all right? So the same thing with the sheriff's services, 627. I'm not sure what happened there, to be honest. It has always been 6,000 to 8,000. For some reason, it was reduced to 3 in the 2023 budget. They've already collected almost 4, so I doubled it in at least over 6 months. And again, you'll look at that in August. The 628 is copy fees, and 628,001 is copy fees registered deeds. The registered deeds switched software to Tyler Technologies a couple of years ago, so they're able to pull more income off the internet, off the web, for copy fees. So they're generating 50,000 on their own. And I think what happened in the proposed budget for 23 is the numbers were flipped. Meaning they left 50 for the rest of us and made the registered deeds line number 25. Well, she's already collected 18. So I've taken those copy fees and I've actually put that to 15,000 going back to prior of when her software came in. You know, so the typical, looked like the typical 2018, 2019, 2017 prior to that, it was anywhere between 16 and 20,000 in copy fees. And that's just something similar, not small, but it's 50 cents a page if you want a copy of something in the clerk's office. And we all have a flat 50-cent fee, unless it's a special, something that's needed and there's another charge on top of that. So you want to come in, you want to look at somebody's court case and you just want a copy, it's 50 cents. So that's where that copy fees goes into. The 664-100 investment interest earnings for American Rescue. I think that was the $250 I would say is prior to the bank interest rates going up. Because last year it collected almost 6. Now we're already at 5, so I bumped it up to 10. And John's interest that he's gaining too on our interest earnings, you'll see that when we bring the budget to you. I typically don't touch that interest earnings until it's closer to the end of the year, because some of the paper that he has, paper investments, you can actually, it looks like it's a loss, but it's not. That's the account we use. So it may look like you got 72, but at the end of the year it's 50, because that other money is going to get paid out the next year. It's just how paper and commercial, market-to-market value, all that kind of fun stuff. I know nothing about it, I just pretend to know. All right, and the last one is the 101-687-014. This is the MMRMA reimbursements. So typically, we look for $100,000 that comes back after our audit. But Trina had applied for a RAMP grant, so that money goes in here. So that's her 50%. I won't go through each and every one of these. Basically, when Kathy will be preparing over the next probably 60 days, I would state, she is going to be preparing a staffing level. And I know we didn't give you budget books to look at staffing levels, but in your budget books, when you go in August, there is going to be a sheet of paper for each and every department. This is where you find your authorized staffing levels. So, for instance, this is building safety. There's 1 building official, 1 administrative, 2 secretary, and 4 inspectors. So what we budget out is how much is going to be salary, how much is going to be non-work holiday, how much is their hospitalization, how much is their social security, how much is their earned retirement. Again, these fall between the 702 to the 719. 720 is the life insurance and short-term disability. That actually did not get adjusted in 2023. I told Kathy that I'm not going to worry about it right now. There should have been at least plugged a 3 to 4% increase in our short-term, because it is based on our salary. So your salaries go up, your fees go up. It's a per dollar charge. Yeah, he knows all about that. So we're not going to look at that unless we need to by end of year, is how I'm thinking. Because some of these budgets, you can take a couple hundred hits, or maybe 1,000 if they don't spend everything in the budget. So we won't look at that. You will, though, in year 2024, we'll take the current month of May, we're going to multiply that sucker by 3%, we're going to times it by 12, and we're going to plug that in. And that will be your proposed for 24. So that's up to date and running there. So on these adjustments here, I went in this weekend and I created these documents showing the increase and what current pay is currently for these employees. Kathy will then take these, roll these, and make these into 24. And she will take from your union contracts and your non-personnel policies, and she will reallocate and configure what these rates will be for 2024. These numbers are represented in those 702s to 719s on all those pages. So I'm not going to necessarily go over each one of those. It is by department. It starts from the very top and goes down all the way to the end, which is the 3rd page. I will point out in here, per board motion, if it's not a 702 to a 719, that means that there was a board motion that was not budgeted or needed the equivalent. So the RAP grant was 19. The county match was 19, but her project is 38. So you have 38 in here that's being, that I'm increasing that 19 so she can spend the 38 that's board approved.
It's about midway on page 3.
So that would be the only time that you're not going to see something that's salary related, it's a capital outlay. The other thing that we did not have before the 2023 budget was approved was your ME, your medical examiner contract. That was going back and forth since last November up until just recently. So that is a new number that's also coming across from the medical examiner. Again, not one of the 702s to 719s. Oh, yep. So remonumentation is also in here as a contractual, and that is corresponding with the revenue that we got in. So I correspond the revenue with the expense. Again, producing a balanced budget. Okay. On the very last page, right above Kathy's signature, there are 3 transfer outs. So in the next one, I'll be able to touch base with that one. The 911 dispatch services. This will be something that I'm working with Sean. We will be looking at again in August, and or even in July when your tower comes up for your capital outlay. In the past, you've been able to purchase and construct towers within the tower fund, which is 518. The tower fund is funded by the revenue that is on your towers. So if you're collecting $335,000 in revenue and you have it estimated out in agreements to be set aside, and that's the revenue, that's all you're going to be working with. In the past, I have generated, that fund has been able to generate almost $200,000 that goes towards 911 dispatch. So here on this number where it says transfer out 911 dispatch, please know that that 918,510 plus 195,000 is your 911 dispatch funding.
150 from the surcharge.
Correct. There's 150 that you'll see in the transfer that comes from the state of Michigan that transfers into 911. And that's called E911 Wireless, which is a fund that's attached to your phone bill. So the next one underneath that is the capital projects building. I'm transferring from the general fund 51,000. You have the board motion for the 32,268 that you did, and then the mini split, and then the sergeant's room, and then you have the limit, whatever that other one was. Mitsubishi cooling system, and the mini split. So that's where I'm coming up with that.
The drinking
51,270.
fountains? Was it the drinking fountains?
No,
No.
the drinking fountains are coming from,
Separate?
separate from the BOC.
Okay.
Yep. And the last one, we talked about that, and we have a board motion. It's to transfer from the general fund to the IT to pay for the special assessment district's software, BSNA, into the IT because it was not budgeted. And that was a general fund expense.
Drinking fountains are on page 1.
Under capital outlay, board of commissioners, under 5,000.
Jen, I have a question.
Yep.
On page 1, we have both the Sutton's Bay deputy and the Leelanau Township deputy, but I don't see where the revenue comes in for that.
Yep, so I didn't touch that only because it will be amended for 24. So I kept it the same for now, and they utilized what was last year's number. So yes, when you get your 2024 budget, whatever expense is to Sutton's Bay Village or to Leelanau Township, you have a corresponding revenue, because those are both contracted employees. So the village, we have a contract with, an agreement, and they pay that, and Leelanau Township is the same.
We've got 8 or 9 minutes to 7. Any questions for Kathy or Jen? Is this a good stopping place?
We can finish with this when we get to the financial.
If anybody has questions on 8, 9, and 10 or the transfer, we can discuss that.
Those are set for approval tonight.
They are
Pardon?
set for approval
These are
tonight.
set for.
So we will, if they have questions, we'll do it during the board meeting. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We now are at our second public comment section for this meeting. We will adjourn for about 5 minutes, and then we will reconvene for a board meeting. But does anybody, any public want to make public comment at this time? Do we have commissioner comments? Do we have any commissioner comments?
Thank you.
Except a big thank you for Jen and Kathy and the team.
Thank you.
Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We will reconvene at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.